Mom, you really think you can afford that coffee? My son David said it loud enough for the entire diner to hear. His wife Rachel giggled behind her manicured hand, pretending to be embarrassed, but clearly enjoying the scene. The waitress froze halfway through pouring my refill. I looked at the steaming mug in front of me, $2.50, and smiled faintly. I think I can manage, I whispered. David leaned back in the booth, tapping his gold watch. You live on Social Security and pity checks, Mom. Don't act like you're still the lady of Maplewood Heights. That last phrase made the air in the diner go cold. Everyone in our small Ohio town knew the house, the $3.2 million white brick mansion on Hillcrest Lane. My late husband Thomas built it with his own hands and 40 years of sweat running his construction company. After he died, I kept the lights on the garden trimmed and the mortgage paid. Alone. Now my son sat there mocking me like a stranger. David, I said softly, this isn't necessary. Oh, but it is. Rachel cut in her voice, honeyed with venom. He just wants you to face reality. You're old broke and the house is falling apart. Maybe it's time to sell before the bank takes it anyway. People were watching now. The man from the post office, the nurse from the clinic, even old Martha at the counter pretending not to listen while her pie went untouched. My other child, Lily, stirred her straw in silence. She'd come down from Cleveland to check on me but hadn't looked me in the eye once. Rachel smirked. I heard you pawned your jewelry last month. What's next? Begging the church fund again? A small laugh escaped her, high and sharp like glass breaking. Something inside me cracked a little. I reached for my purse, the old brown leather one Thomas bought me for our 25th anniversary. Inside was the bank envelope I'd picked up that morning. I touched it for courage, then withdrew my hand. Not yet. The waitress finally moved. Ma'am, would you like a box for your sandwich? She asked quietly, trying to rescue me from humiliation. I nodded, forcing a smile. Thank you, dear. David rolled his eyes. You see, always the same. Acting proud when you've got nothing left. We're not kids anymore, Mom. You can stop pretending you're some kind of queen. He leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough to sound cruel. Dad's gone. His company's gone. You've got no income, no savings, and that big house is a money pit. You're a poor, retired fool. The words echoed in my head. Poor, retired, fool. Each one landed like a nail in my chest. Rachel's phone buzzed and she grinned. Speaking of money, the realtor's office just texted me back. They said a buyer's interested. If you sign now, we can get maybe $2 million after taxes. Think of how comfortable you'll be in a little condo. A little condo. After 40 years in that home, after raising them under that roof, after losing my husband in the very bedroom where we shared every dream. I tried to swallow, but the lump in my throat wouldn't move. Lily finally spoke barely above a whisper. Mom, maybe it's for the best. Her eyes didn't meet mine. Something inside me, something that had been quiet for years, began to stir. It wasn't anger. It was older, heavier, like a deep, steady pulse beneath the pain. I looked around the diner. The silence was thick now. Then from the next booth, an old man with a baseball cap spoke up. Ma'am, he said slowly, you hold your head high. I've seen too many good folks lose their dignity just because their kids forgot who raised them. His words hit harder than David's cruelty, because they reminded me I hadn't always been small. I hadn't always been powerless. David laughed. Don't listen to him, Mom. He probably thinks you still have money. He grabbed the check from the table. We'll take care of it. You can pay us back later. Rachel snorted. If she ever can. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just opened my purse again, fingers brushing the crisp white envelope. Inside it was a single note from my banker, Mr. Coleman. I could still hear his calm voice that morning. Don't say anything yet. When they're all together, I'll explain everything myself. 7 words that kept replaying in my mind. I closed the purse, lifted my chin, and said quietly, You may be right, David. Maybe I don't have much left. He grinned triumphantly, finally some honesty. I looked at my reflection in the diner window, silver hair, tired eyes, but a hint of something fierce returning, because what my children didn't know was that Mr. Coleman's everything might just change their lives forever. And as I left that diner, hearing their laughter fade behind me, one question burned quietly inside. How did my own children become strangers? And what would they do when they found out the truth? When I got home that afternoon, the sky over Maplewood was gray, heavy with snow that refused to fall. The house stood quiet at the end of Hillcrest Lane, the same white brick mansion Thomas and I had poured 40 years of our lives into. The same house my children now called the old lady's burden. I set my purse on the hallway table where the wedding photo still stood. Thomas in his navy suit, me in that cream dress I'd sewn myself. His smile looked warm enough to melt winter. I pressed my fingers against the frame and whispered, "You'd be ashamed of them, Tom, of what we raised." The grandfather clock ticked in the living room, loud and lonely. I sank into the leather chair by the fireplace, my knees aching. Age has a way of whispering its presence through pain, knees, hips, memory, but nothing hurts quite like disrespect. Thomas used to say money's not what makes a home, decency does. He believed that with all his heart. We didn't have much at first, just a $200 apartment above the hardware store where he started his business, but we worked hard. When the company grew, he made sure everyone in town had a chance to work. Even David's first job was sweeping the site floors at age 16. I remembered those days vividly, David beaming with pride, covered in dust, shouting, "Dad, I can't wait to take over one day." Now that same boy looked at me as if I were a stranger, taking up too much space. After Thomas passed, everything started to unravel. The grief didn't hit them the way it hit me. They came for the will, not the memories. They wanted figures, not photos. The company's shares, $12 million worth, were divided among the three of us, but David took control as CEO. "It's what Dad would have wanted," he said. I didn't argue. I trusted him even when the checks stopped coming. He claimed business was bad, that the pandemic had bled the company dry. I believed him until I saw his wife's new Mercedes parked outside a Lake Erie summer house. Lily, my daughter, had been softer once. She was my pride, a school teacher with a heart for children until her husband lost his job. Then she began to call me with that same rehearsed tone, "Mom, just a little help until we get back on our feet." The little help became $40,000, then another $1,000, and finally, silence when I asked her to slow down. That's when I realized they didn't see me as their mother anymore. I was their safety net, their silent donor. I lived alone after that. The house was too big for one person, but I couldn't leave it. Every brick carried his memory. The cedar shelves he built, the oak banister he carved himself, even the faint scent of sawdust in the garage, it still made me feel close to him. But lately, the quiet had turned cruel. The phone rang only when bills came due, my mailbox filled with glossy ads for retirement homes. I once found a pamphlet on my doorstep, "Golden Haven Assisted Living Dignity in Your Final Years." There was no return address, but I knew the handwriting. Lily's. I cried that night, not because I feared dying there, but because she thought I belonged there. I began visiting the local diner just to hear other voices. The waitress Dana always called me sweetheart. Sometimes that was the only kind word I heard all week. But even in that small mercy, shame followed me. People whispered, "That's Mrs. Harlow, used to own Harlow Construction. Her kids took everything, poor thing. Poor thing." The phrase stung more than the gossip, because I wasn't poor, not yet. Inside my filing cabinet was something no one but Thomas and I ever knew about: the joint savings account, the certificates of company stock registered in my maiden name, and the letter from our attorney, sealed and untouched since the week before he died. Thomas had told me once, in his last clear days before the stroke, "If the kids ever forget who built this family, open that envelope and call Mr. Coleman at the bank." For years, I didn't. I believed love would be stronger than greed. I thought patience would remind them. But after that lunch, after hearing my own son call me a fool in front of strangers, something inside me shifted. I went to Maplewood First Bank the next morning. Mr. Coleman, gray-haired and kind-eyed, had handled our account since the beginning. He took one look at me, stood up, and said softly, "Mrs. Harlow, I've been expecting this day." I told him what happened. Every cruel word, every humiliation. He listened without interrupting. Then he opened a folder from his drawer and handed me an envelope marked "Confidential." "Everything your husband planned is in here," he said. but please don't speak of it yet. When your family gathers, let me explain it to them myself. I'll say 7 words that'll make things right again." I frowned. 7 words. He smiled faintly. "You'll know them when you hear them." I didn't open the envelope, not yet. It wasn't time. That night, as I sat in the living room staring at the flickering fire, the sound of laughter echoed faintly in my memory. My children, years ago, roasting marshmallows in this very spot. I had believed love was unbreakable. Now I wasn't so sure. Still, I decided one thing: I would invite them all back to this house. For dinner. For one last family night. And when Mr. Coleman arrived, the truth would finally come to light. Because if my children wanted to see a poor retired fool, then I would let them until the moment they realized how very wrong they were. The smell of roasted chicken filled the house, mingling with thyme garlic and the faint scent of lemon I always rubbed on the skin before baking. For a moment, the warmth almost made me believe things could be normal again. The table was set with the china Thomas bought me on our 10th anniversary, pale blue with tiny silver edges. I hadn't used it in years. Tonight, I wanted everything to look perfect. It wasn't just a dinner. It was my 68th birthday. When I called David and Lily 2 weeks earlier to invite them, their voices carried that same detached politeness I'd come to dread. "Of course, Mom," Lily had said. "We'll bring something." She didn't. At 6 o'clock, headlights swept across the window and the sharp sound of tires crunching gravel broke the silence. I straightened my sweater and whispered to Thomas's picture on the mantel, "Wish me luck." David walked in first, tall, confident, and smelling like cologne that cost more than my month's groceries. Rachel followed, balancing a small box wrapped in gold paper. Lily arrived a few minutes later with her husband Carl and a store-bought cake that still had the grocery sticker on it. "Happy birthday, Mom," David said, kissing the air near my cheek. "Still cooking yourself, huh? You should really hire someone. At your age, bending over ovens is risky." I smiled tightly. "I'll risk it for a warm meal with family." Rachel placed the gift on the table. "It's just a little something," she said, a candle set from Crate and Barrel. "Thought it might make this old place smell fresher." Old place. I caught that. We sat down. The air was thick with politeness, the kind you can slice with a knife. Carl poured himself a glass of wine before anyone else. David loosened his tie. The clock ticked louder than usual. "So, Mom," David began between bites, "I was talking to the insurance agent this week. He says keeping a property like this without a full-time caretaker isn't smart. You've got, 4 bedrooms? Pool yard, taxes, heating." "It's too much." I dabbed my lips with the napkin. "I manage fine." Rachel laughed softly. "Sure, if you like living like it's 1985. The roof leaks, the porch is cracked, and the neighbors say the place looks haunted." The knife in my hand trembled slightly. I set it down. "This house was built by your father." "Everything in it is outdated," David interrupted. "Look, Mom, we've been thinking. It's time to sell. You could move into a nice retirement condo near Lily's place. 2 bedrooms, elevator, gym, the whole thing." I could feel Lily tense beside him, but she didn't object. Carl, drunk after his second glass, mumbled, "Condos are easier for old folks anyway. No lawns to mow." Rachel leaned forward, her eyes glinting. "David's found a buyer already. $3.2 million if we move fast." Her voice stretched around the number like it was a trophy. I looked around the table at my family, my blood, my everything, and realized they'd come not for my birthday, not even for me, but for what the house was worth. "You've already been talking to buyers?" I asked quietly. David sighed, impatient. "Don't get dramatic. We're just trying to help before things get worse. Property taxes are due. The furnace needs replacing and you think I can't handle it?" I finished for him. He didn't deny it. Lily shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, maybe they're right. You deserve somewhere easier. This place, it's full of memories. Maybe it's time to let go." Her tone was gentle, but the words landed like stones. The cake sat untouched between us. The candlelight flickered against their faces, familiar yet distant, like a family portrait drawn by someone who never met us. Then Rachel reached for her purse. "We actually brought the papers," she said. I froze. "Papers?" "Just a power of attorney form," David said casually. It'll make things smoother when dealing with the realtor. You don't have to worry about signatures or appointments." I stared at the folder. My name was already typed neatly across the top. "You printed this without asking me." "Don't overreact," Rachel said, pouring herself more wine. "We're just saving you from stress. You're 70. Mom, 68. She smiled. "Same difference." The room went quiet except for the clock. Then, as if the universe couldn't stand the silence, thunder cracked outside, rolling through the valley. Lily reached for the folder. Maybe she should think about it first. David slammed his palm on the table. "Think about what? She's alone in a mansion she can't afford. Dad would have wanted us to protect her." The words twisted in my chest. Protect me. By taking everything I had left, I stood slowly pushing the chair back. "Your father would have wanted you to remember who built this life for you," I said, my voice shaking but strong. "He worked himself sick to give you everything." "Yeah, and look where it got him," David muttered. That was it. I slapped my hand on the table so hard the silverware jumped. "Don't you dare speak about him that way." Even Carl sobered up for a second. Rachel's eyes narrowed. "We're not villains, you know. We're practical. But if you'd rather rot alone in this museum, fine." Lily whispered. "Rachel, stop." "No, let her finish," I said. "I want to hear exactly what they think of me." David's jaw tightened. "Fine. You're stubborn, ungrateful, and living in denial. You're broke, Mom. The company's not paying dividends, the house is bleeding money in your savings." He stopped abruptly, as if realizing he'd said too much. My heart stuttered. "What do you know about my savings?" Rachel exchanged a quick glance with him, then shrugged. "You told Lily last year you barely had anything left. We assumed it's gone." Assumed. Or investigated. Before I could reply, the doorbell rang. A soft, steady chime that sliced through the tension. Rachel frowned. Expecting someone, I looked toward the hallway. The clock struck 7, right on time. Through the frosted glass, I could make out the familiar shape of a man in a gray overcoat, Mr. Coleman, the bank manager. I felt my pulse quicken. "I invited him," I said quietly. David's brow furrowed. Why I met his eyes, steady now, no longer trembling. Because I thought my children deserved to hear the truth from someone they'll actually listen to. The storm outside roared louder as I walked toward the door, my hand already on the handle. Behind me, their voices overlapped confusion, annoyance, disbelief. And as I opened the door to welcome Mr. Coleman in, I thought, let them mock me one last time. They had no idea what was coming. Mr. Coleman stepped into the foyer, shaking the rain from his gray overcoat. His silver hair gleamed under the chandelier, and his calm, steady expression carried the same quiet strength it always had. "Good evening, Mrs. Harlow," he said warmly, nodding to me before glancing at my family. "And good evening to everyone else. I hope I'm not interrupting." David's eyebrows shot up. "Bank business during dinner. Mom, really?" Rachel gave a low laugh. "That's new. Do you pay your bills with birthday cake now?" I forced a polite smile. Mr. Coleman was kind enough to stop by with something important. He smiled gently, setting a leather folder on the side table. "I'll only take a moment of your time." Lily stood halfway from her chair, nervous. "Mom, what's going on?" "Just some papers your father left behind," I said. "I thought it would be best if everyone was here." David scoffed. "Oh, please. If this is about Dad's old accounts, we already went through that years ago. There's nothing left." Mr. Coleman opened the folder and adjusted his glasses. "I wouldn't be so sure about that." That sentence alone seemed to ripple through the room. Rachel leaned back, smirking. "Let me guess, another tax notice, because that's all this house is good for." Mr. Coleman ignored her tone. "Actually, Mrs. Harlow's late husband left a few matters unfinished. She came to me recently, and I've been reviewing the files." David crossed his arms. "And before we continue," Mr. Coleman said, "I'll need Mrs. Harlow's permission to discuss any private financial information in front of you." I nodded. "You have it." He began flipping through the papers. "Very well, then. Thomas Harlow established multiple accounts and trusts under both his name and his wife's maiden name. Some of these records were never merged with the estate documents after his passing. It appears David cut in sharply. Wait. You're saying Dad had secret accounts?" Rachel chuckled. "Sure, and maybe a hidden treasure map, too. Mr. Coleman looked up, his expression unreadable. You'd be surprised what some people leave behind, Mrs. Carter. Rachel's face froze. She didn't like being spoken to with that quiet authority. David's tone turned impatient. Look, if this is about some dusty old paperwork, just skip to the part that matters. Mom's struggling and this house is sinking. We're trying to help her get out before she loses it. Coleman closed the folder slowly. Loses it to whom? To the bank, David said. Taxes bills, she can't afford it. The banker turned his calm gaze on me. Is that true, Mrs. Harlow? I shook my head. No, Mr. Coleman, my taxes are current, my bills are paid. David's jaw tightened. Mom, please don't start pretending everything's fine. Rachel's laughter cut through the tension. She's embarrassed, that's all. Look around, the furniture's ancient, the wallpaper's peeling, and she wears the same sweater every time we see her. She's living like a charity case. The words hit like open palms. Mr. Coleman's brow furrowed, but he said nothing. Lily whispered, Rachel, please. But Rachel wasn't done. She leaned forward, eyes flashing. You think you're still somebody, don't you? You sit in this dusty house pretending you're a Harlow when everyone in town knows the company is ours now. You don't even have access to the accounts anymore. Everything Dad built, David rebuilt it. You should be grateful he hasn't kicked you out yet. The silence that followed felt suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat. Every word she said was cruel, calculated, meant to humiliate. David didn't stop her. He just stared at me cold, detached, as if the woman who raised him was a stranger. I stood slowly. My chair creaked, the old wood groaning under the weight of everything left unsaid. Rachel, I said, voice trembling, you're a guest in this home. She laughed. Guest? Oh, sweetheart, you're the guest. You just don't realize it yet. That's when the old man from the diner, Mr. Collins, my neighbor, appeared in the doorway. He must have come through the open gate when he saw the banker's car parked outside. His voice cracked like thunder. Enough. Everyone turned. He stepped forward, leaning on his cane. I've lived next door to this woman for 30 years. I saw her mow her lawn in the snow when your father was sick. I saw her pay the workers out of her own pocket when the company was short. And I never once saw her ask any of you for help. Rachel rolled her eyes. Oh, please, who invited you? I invited myself, he said firmly. Because watching children tear down their own mother like this, it's a disgrace. For a second, the shame flickered across Lily's face. But David's pride held firm. This is a family matter, he snapped. Stay out of it. Mr. Collins looked at me, his eyes soft. You don't need to say a word, Margaret. Truth has a way of showing itself. Mr. Coleman cleared his throat gently. Actually, he said, that's precisely why I'm here. Rachel smirked. What, to read us another tax bill? He didn't answer. Instead, he carefully placed the folder on the table. Mrs. Harlow, I believe the time has come to tell them what Thomas left behind. David exhaled sharply. Fine. Enlighten us. What secret fortune are we talking about? Mr. Coleman folded his hands. His voice was calm but deliberate. I'll explain everything, but I must ask for your patience. There are details you've all misunderstood. Rachel snorted. Like what? That she isn't broke. He met her gaze. That she isn't the one losing everything. The words hung in the air, heavy, strange, electric. David frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Mr. Coleman didn't answer immediately. He looked at me instead as if waiting for my permission. I nodded once. Then he said quietly, before your father died, he transferred all controlling shares of Harlow Construction and the property at 145 Hillcrest Lane into a trust managed solely by your mother. The room erupted. What? David shouted, half rising from his chair. That's impossible. I'm the CEO. The board approved it. The board, Mr. Coleman interrupted smoothly, approved your position on the assumption that the shares remained in the estate. But legally, they don't. They've been under Mrs. Harlow's name for 12 years. Rachel's mouth fell open. 12 years, yes, Mr. Coleman said, since before your father passed, which means every dividend, every asset, every company property you've used belongs to her. Lily gasped. Carl dropped his glass. David's face turned red. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I simply stood there, steady as the storm outside, watching the people I loved realize they never really knew me at all. But they hadn't heard everything yet, because Mr. Coleman still had one more file to open, and what was inside would make their humiliation complete. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Only the ticking of the clock and the steady hum of rain filled the silence. Then David's voice broke through sharp disbelieving. "This is insane. There's no way Dad would have done that behind my back." Mr. Coleman didn't flinch. "I assure you, Mr. Harlow, the paperwork is legitimate. I oversaw it myself. Your father wanted to secure his wife's future." Rachel pushed her chair back, her bracelets clinking like tiny chains. "So you're saying everything we've been managing, the houses, the accounts, even the company cars, all of that belongs to her?" "Yes," Mr. Coleman said simply. David's face flushed deep red. "You must be mistaken. I run Harlow Construction. I've signed every contract for the past 7 years." "Then you've been signing them," Mr. Coleman replied calmly, "under your mother's legal authority. You've been acting as an employee, not an owner." The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel stood, her voice rising. No, this is some trick. She's manipulating you. She's probably confused, and you're taking advantage of it." "Rachel," I said quietly, "sit down. Don't you dare tell me what to do in my house." I met her eyes, my voice steady. "Your house." She froze. David slammed his fist onto the table so hard the wine glasses rattled. "You can't just waltz in here with some banker and erase everything I built. I've kept that company alive. You wouldn't even understand what it takes to run a business." I took a slow breath. "You mean the business your father built, the one you drained dry with your bonuses and vacations? The one you claimed was barely surviving while you bought a second boat?" He blinked, startled. "That I knew." "I saw the tax reports," I said, "and the transfers. Don't look so shocked. Mr. Coleman showed me what you've been doing." Rachel's voice shook with fury. "You went behind his back," I smiled faintly. "No." I finally opened my eyes. Lily whispered, "Mom, what are you saying?" I turned to her gently. "I'm saying that while you all treated me like a burden, I kept paying the property tax on this home, the insurance on the company trucks, and the last of your father's hospital bills. You thought I had nothing left, but it was me who was keeping everything from collapsing." David looked like he might explode. "You're lying. This is a setup." Mr. Coleman cleared his throat. "It's not. I have all the supporting documents right here. Your father made it clear in his instructions. If my children ever treat their mother without respect, the trust will remain solely hers until the day she dies." Those were his words. Rachel let out a shrill laugh. "Oh, please. You expect us to believe some sentimental line like that?" I looked at her. "You don't have to believe it. You'll just have to live with it." David shoved his chair back. "This isn't over. I'll contest the trust. I'll get our lawyer, and when the court sees you're senile, they'll side with me." "Careful," Mr. Coleman warned softly. "Threatening an elderly woman in front of witnesses isn't wise, and if you plan to challenge it, you'll have to explain where the company's missing funds went." The color drained from David's face. Rachel turned to him sharply. "What missing funds, Rachel?" he hissed. "Not now." "Oh, don't. Not now, me." "You told me the company was doing fine." Lily covered her mouth. "David, what did you do?" He didn't answer. His silence said everything. Mr. Coleman opened another folder. "Mrs. Harlow, your husband anticipated this. He instructed me to provide you with these documents, account statements, property titles, and a notarized letter confirming that your children have no claim over your personal or joint assets." I took the folder, my hands trembling. I didn't want revenge, not really, but I couldn't stop the deep, aching satisfaction that came with seeing the truth finally laid bare. David's voice softened, almost breaking. "Mom, you can't do this to me. I'm your son." I looked at him, the same boy who used to bring me flowers from the backyard, who once held my hand when we crossed the street. But that boy had grown into a man who mocked me for buying coffee. "Being my son doesn't give you the right to treat me like trash," I said quietly. "I raised you better than this." Rachel suddenly burst into tears. "This is unbelievable." "We've been working our lives off for this family, for yourselves," I said. "Not for family." The tension cracked like lightning. Carl, who had stayed silent most of the evening, muttered under his breath, "This is a mess. Let's just go, Lily." but Lily didn't move. She was staring at me with wide, guilty eyes. "Mom," she whispered, "I didn't know he was doing all that. I thought he was helping you." Her voice trembled and I saw tears beginning to spill down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said. "I really am." I wanted to believe her, but after years of disappointment, the words felt fragile. Still, something in me softened. "It's not too late to start being kind," I said, "to anyone." David suddenly snatched the folder from the table. "I'm not letting some old papers decide my life." Mr. Coleman stepped forward. "Mr. Harlow, if you destroy those documents, you'll be committing a felony. Everything here has been recorded and filed with the state." David froze the folder halfway open. For a moment, he looked lost, like a child who just realized the game was over. Rain thundered against the windows. Then, in a low, bitter voice, he said, "You've ruined me." I met his eyes. "No, David, you ruined yourself when you forgot what love costs." He stormed toward the door, Rachel following in angry silence. Lily stood still, her hands trembling, whispering, "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom." I touched her arm gently. "I know." When the front door slammed shut behind them, the whole house seemed to exhale. The only sound left was the crackling fire and the rain outside. Mr. Coleman gathered his briefcase. "It's not over yet," he said quietly. "He'll fight it, but you've got every legal protection you need. I'll make sure of that." I nodded. "Thank you, Harold." He gave me a kind smile. "You know, Mrs. Harlow, sometimes the hardest justice is simply letting the truth speak." When he left, I sank into the chair by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass like tears. I didn't have the strength to cry. They'd called me a fool, a burden, a poor old woman clinging to her past. But they'd forgotten one thing: I built this life with my own hands, and if I had to, I'd build it again. Still, as the thunder rolled through the valley, one thought haunted me. David wasn't done. He'd come back, and when he did, he'd try to destroy what was left. And that would be the moment everything changed. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too still, too aware of what had happened. Every shadow seemed to echo with voices that weren't there anymore. My children's anger, Rachel's mocking laughter, Mr. Coleman's calm tone cutting through it all. The fire had died out, leaving behind a faint smell of smoke and the hollow chill of silence. I sat in Thomas's old armchair by the window, the same chair where he used to read the paper every morning before work. The leather was cracked, now worn thin, where his hands once rested. My fingers traced the marks like they were a map of my life, every wrinkle, every scar, every memory, pressed into the fabric of this home. Outside, the rain had stopped. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, and I could see Mr. Collins's porch light across the yard glowing faintly through the fog. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had a family anymore. But then again, maybe I hadn't had one for a long time. When Thomas was alive, everything made sense. He was a man of few words, but every word carried weight. He'd come home covered in sawdust, smelling of cedar and gasoline, his hands rough, but his smile soft. He built more than houses, he built people. Workers loved him. Clients trusted him, and I adored him. We weren't rich back then, but we were proud. We saved every penny, avoided debt, and never took a single shortcut. I cooked every meal, kept the books, and raised the children while he worked 16-hour days. We built Harlow Construction from nothing but grit and faith. When the company started to thrive, Thomas wanted to share it with everyone. He opened a scholarship for local kids, donated lumber to rebuild a church roof, and paid his employees extra at Christmas. He never forgot where he came from, and he made sure his children knew that too, or so I thought. I remembered the day David graduated from college. He wore his first tailored suit and told his father, "Someday, I'll make this company worth millions." Thomas had laughed, clapping him on the back. "Make it worth something, son, not just dollars." That lesson never stuck. When Thomas had his first stroke, the doctor said he needed rest, no more stress, but he couldn't stop worrying about the business. He used to wake up in the middle of the night whispering, "If something happens to me, take care of it, Maggie. Take care of them." He never said what it was. I thought he meant the company. Now I realized he meant the family. After his second stroke, I spent 6 months sleeping on a hospital cot. I watched his strong hands turn frail, his voice fade to a whisper. The last time he spoke, he called me the anchor. "You hold everything together," he said, "even when they drift away." And drift away they did. At the funeral, David didn't cry. He stood like a businessman overseeing a transaction. He took the company keys before the casket was even lowered into the ground. Rachel was already on her phone whispering to her realtor friend about liquidating assets. Lily cried softly but disappeared 2 days later, leaving only a text, "We'll talk when things settle." Things never did. In the months that followed, I learned the weight of loneliness. Not the quiet kind, but the heavy, suffocating kind that sits on your chest and whispers that you're invisible. I stopped hosting Sunday dinners. I stopped turning on the porch light at night. I even stopped baking Thomas's favorite pecan pie because there was no one left to eat it. I tried to fill the days gardening, volunteering at the church thrift shop, reading by the window, but the emptiness stayed. Every corner of this house reminded me of what I'd lost. Until one morning, about a year ago, when I went through Thomas's desk. I wasn't looking for anything, just tidying up, chasing ghosts. That's when I found the second envelope. It was hidden behind a false bottom drawer, sealed with wax. My name was written on it in his handwriting, the kind that slanted upward like he was always reaching for something better. I didn't open it then. I couldn't. The grief was too raw, and part of me feared what it might say. I put it back, telling myself I'd open it someday. Someday became a year, and then the diner incident happened. David's insults, Rachel's smirk, Lily's Helen's. That night I went straight to the study, opened that drawer, and broke the seal. Inside there were only 3 things: a handwritten letter, a small silver key, and a business card with the name Harold Coleman, Senior Bank Manager, Maplewood First. The letter said, "If you're reading this, Maggie, then they've forgotten what love means. The accounts, the company, the home, they were never the true inheritance. What I left behind for you will explain everything. Use the key when the time feels right." The handwriting trembled toward the end as if the stroke had already begun. I remember pressing the paper to my chest, crying until the ink blurred beneath my tears. That letter had sat in my purse ever since. The silver key was still in my pocket, cold and heavy as a heartbeat. Mr. Coleman had seen it the day I visited him. He smiled when I showed it to him and said quietly, "Then you're ready." But ready for what I didn't know yet. That night, as the wind howled through the chimney, I looked at Thomas's photo on the mantel, his eyes steady, kind knowing. "I'm trying, Tom," I whispered. "I'm trying to hold them together like you said. But maybe it's too late." The photo caught the reflection of lightning for a brief second, and I could almost swear he was smiling. I reached into my sweater pocket, touched the key again, and for the first time I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not sadness, not anger, but purpose. Whatever Thomas had left for me, it wasn't just money. It was a message, a final plan, and I had the feeling it would turn everything I thought I knew upside down. The storm had passed by morning, leaving behind a thick mist that clung to the trees like ghosts reluctant to leave. I woke early, long before sunrise, unable to shake the restless feeling that had sat in my chest all night. The silver key lay on my nightstand beside Thomas's letter, its metal cool against the weak dawn light. For the first time since he died, I felt him near. I made myself a cup of coffee, black and bitter, and sat by the window. Outside, the world looked washed, clean, wet roads, dripping branches, quiet. The house, however, felt charged alive with the memory of last night's confrontation. I could still hear David's voice echoing through the halls, that venomous mix of anger and disbelief. "You've ruined me, Mom." No, I thought. "You ruined yourself." The sound of the grandfather clock striking 6 pulled me back to the present. My eyes drifted to the study door, the one I hadn't opened since finding the envelope. Something inside me whispered that it was time. I slipped the key into my pocket and walked down the hall, the floorboards creaking beneath my slippers. The study smelled faintly of cedar and dust. The morning light pooled across the old mahogany desk where Thomas had spent half his life balancing ledgers and signing contracts. I'd cleaned that desk 1,000 times, but never noticed how uneven the left drawer sat. My fingers brushed along its edge, and there, hidden under a thin layer of varnish, was a tiny keyhole. I froze. The key in my pocket suddenly felt heavier. My pulse quickened as I slid it in. It fit perfectly. With a soft click, the drawer released, revealing a narrow compartment beneath the regular one, a hidden chamber I'd never known existed. Inside was a small black notebook wrapped in plastic and an old flash drive taped to its cover. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. The notebook smelled faintly of old ink and tobacco, the scent of Thomas's study. On the first page, written in his strong, familiar hand, were the words, "If you're reading this, Maggie, then you've reached the point I feared most, when love no longer holds this family together. What's inside will explain everything." I turned the pages carefully. They were filled with notes, dates, and names, not sentimental memories, but business records. Thomas had kept meticulous logs, transactions, investments, wire transfers. But halfway through, something changed. The entries grew more personal. David has begun taking funds without approval. I've warned him twice. Rachel convinced him to sign off a fake vendor account. I found it in the quarterly reports. If I confront him again, he'll resent me. But if I stay silent, he'll destroy everything. My throat tightened. Page after page, Thomas had documented every dollar David siphoned from the company, every lie wrapped in business necessity. The total by the end of the last entry stunned me. Over $2. $3 million diverted into offshore accounts. I covered my mouth. Oh, Thomas. The flash drive in my palm suddenly seemed to burn. I plugged it into the old laptop on the desk. The screen flickered, then loaded a folder titled Harlow Trust. Private. There were files, dozens of them, spreadsheets, scanned contracts, audio clips. One of the recordings began to play automatically. Thomas's voice. "If you're listening to this, Maggie, then it means I didn't get the chance to fix things myself. David's greed has blinded him. I can't stop him without tearing this family apart, but you can when the time is right." His voice broke slightly before continuing. "I've moved the remaining company shares, our savings, and the Maplewood property holdings into your trust. Not to punish him, but to protect what we built. The documents Mr. Coleman holds are part of that plan. But the rest, the real evidence, is in your hands now." He paused. I could hear him breathing slow and labored. "When he comes for you, don't fight with words. Let the truth speak for itself. Mr. Coleman will know what to do." The recording ended with a faint click. I sat there for several minutes staring at the screen, my hands shaking. The truth was worse than I'd imagined, but it was also the one weapon I hadn't realized I possessed. For years, I'd blamed myself for David's arrogance, for Rachel's cruelty, for Lily's silence. I thought maybe I'd been too soft, too forgiving. But now I saw it for what it was, entitlement passed down like an inheritance they thought they deserved. And now they were going to learn what earned truly meant. I gathered the notebook and flash drive into a small box, locking it with the same key. Then I called Mr. Coleman. He answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Harlow," he said, his voice calm as always. "I was about to call you. There's something you should know. I found the key," I said quietly. "And the notebook." He hesitated. "Then it's time." "Time for what?" "You'll understand soon," he said, "but I must warn you, your son came to the bank first thing this morning. He demanded access to your accounts. When I refused, he threatened legal action." My stomach twisted. "He's not going to stop, is he? No," Mr. Coleman said. "But remember what your husband told you. Let the truth speak." I hung up, my heart pounding. The battle had begun. A knock startled me. I turned toward the front door. Through the glass, I saw Lily standing in the rain, clutching a folder to her chest. Her eyes were red, her shoulders shaking. When I opened the door, she fell into my arms, sobbing. "Mom, I didn't know. David told me everything was fine. He said you were losing it, that Mr. Coleman was manipulating you." I stroked her hair gently. "It's all right, sweetheart. You're here now." She pulled back, tears streaking her cheeks. "He's furious, Mom. He said if you don't hand over the trust by tomorrow, he'll do something stupid." I finished softly. She nodded. I looked past her down the driveway where a black SUV sat idling in the fog. Even from here, I recognized the silhouette behind the wheel. David, watching, waiting. "Come inside," I said, pulling Lily gently toward the warmth of the house. "There's something you need to see, because before this was over, I would make sure my daughter understood everything her father and her brother had sacrificed to protect her. And when the storm returned, it wouldn't find me afraid. It would find me ready." Lily sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her voice hoarse. "Mom, he's not himself. He's dangerous when he's cornered." I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the steam curl upward like a warning. "He's been dangerous for a long time, Lily. We just didn't want to see it." She swallowed hard. "He said he's coming back tonight." I met her eyes. "Good. Let him." Her breath caught. "Mom, please don't provoke him. Just give him what he wants. It's not worth it." I smiled faintly. "You think this is about money?" "He took that from me years ago. What I'm fighting for now is respect." I stood and walked to the study, motioning for her to follow. The box containing Thomas's notebook sat on the desk beside the old lamp. I opened it carefully, pulling out the notebook and flash drive. "Your father kept records of everything I said softly. Every dollar David stole, every lie he told. This," I tapped the notebook, "isn't revenge, it's justice." Lily stared at the pages, her face pale. "He's going to lose everything. Maybe that's what it takes for him to understand what he's done." I picked up the phone and called Mr. Coleman. He answered on the second ring. "Miss Harlow," he said, his voice firm. "I've already contacted the company's legal department. They're reviewing your husband's documentation. If the evidence holds, the board will remove David immediately." "He's not going to take that quietly," I said. "I don't expect him to," Mr. Coleman replied, "which is why I suggest we prepare properly. Properly, I want you to record everything he said, every word he says tonight. If he threatens you or attempts coercion, it will end his claim permanently." Lily's eyes widened. "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious," Mr. Coleman continued. "You're not alone, Mrs. Harlow. I'll be there first thing in the morning with a court representative." I hung up my hand, trembling only slightly. Lily stood frozen in the doorway, torn between fear and disbelief. "Mom, you can't handle him alone." "I won't have to," I said. "The truth will handle him." I showed her the small digital recorder I'd kept in the kitchen drawer for years, a relic from the days when I used to record grocery lists and reminders for Thomas. I pressed the red button. The light blinked once, steady and bright. "Just in case," I said. By afternoon, the fog had lifted. The air outside turned cold and sharp. I spent the next few hours preparing not out of fear, but out of habit. I set the table, made dinner, and cleaned the house. Every motion reminded me of the woman I'd been before, gentle, patient, endlessly forgiving. That woman was gone. Around 8 o'clock, headlights cut across the driveway. Lily stiffened. "It's him." The SUV door slammed, and moments later, David stormed up the steps, Rachel trailing behind him, like a shadow in designer heels. He didn't knock. He just burst through the door. "Where is it?" he demanded. I stayed calm. "Where's what, darling?" He threw a folder onto the table. "The trust, the shares, the company accounts. I spoke to the bank this morning. You've tied everything up so tight. Even I can't touch it." Rachel crossed her arms. "You've gone too far, Margaret. Do you even know what kind of mess you're making? The company's investors are panicking. David could be sued." "Maybe he should be," I said evenly. David's voice cracked with rage. "You're trying to destroy me." "No," I said softly. "You did that yourself when you forgot who helped you climb." He stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "Don't test me, Mom, I swear." "Careful what you swear," I interrupted, keeping my tone low. "You're not talking to your secretary now." Lily stood between us. "David, stop it, please." He pointed at her without looking away from me. "You're taking her side, too. The woman who's about to bankrupt our family." "Our family," I said sharply. "You mean your bank account. Don't pretend this is about anyone but you." He turned, snatching the notebook from the desk. "What's this?" "Put that down," I said. He flipped through the pages, scanning the entries, each one naming him his false invoices, his offshore transfers. His color drained. "Where did you get this?" "From the man who built your life," I said. For a second, I saw fear in his eyes, the raw, childlike kind that comes when truth pierces denial. But then it hardened into fury. "You think this will hold up in court?" he barked. "It's your word against mine." "Not anymore," I said. "The files are already with the bank, the lawyer, and the board." Rachel's face twisted. "You vindictive old witch!" Lily gasped. "Don't talk to her like that." "Oh, please," Rachel snapped. "You're just as pathetic as she is, always playing the victim while we do the work." "The work?" I said. "You mean draining what your father built?" Rachel's hands trembled. "You think this makes you powerful? You're old, Margaret. The world doesn't care about old women with secrets. When you're gone, it'll all come to us anyway." I looked at her calmly. "If you believe that you haven't read the fine print." "What fine print?" "The part where the trust transfers not to you but to charity, if I die under suspicious circumstances." Rachel blinked, stunned. David's voice dropped to a low growl. "You're bluffing." "Try me," I said. He stared at me for a long moment, chest-heaving hands clenched. Then he swept his arm across the table, sending the teacups crashing to the floor. Lily screamed, "Enough!" I shouted, slamming my cane against the tile so hard it echoed through the house. "You will not raise your voice in this home again." The words hung in the air like thunder. For the first time in years, David froze. I straightened my shoulders. "I am not afraid of you. You can take your threats, your lies, and your greed and walk out that door before I call the police." His nostrils flared. For a moment I thought he might hit me. Then his eyes darted to Lily, and something in her face, the shock, the disappointment, stopped him. Without another word, he turned and stormed out into the night. Rachel followed, slamming the door so hard the chandelier shook. The house fell silent again. Lily burst into tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know he'd—" I put a hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault, dear. He made his choices. And tonight I made mine." I walked to the recorder, still blinking red on the shelf, and pressed stop. A small, grim smile crossed my lips. "Let him come for me," I whispered. "The next time he does, he'll find the law waiting." Outside, thunder rumbled again in the distance. It wasn't over. Not yet. Because tomorrow morning, when Mr. Coleman arrived, everything David thought he owned would crumble before his eyes. The next morning, the sky over Maplewood was the color of slate, heavy, unmoving, and silent. I woke before dawn, long before the clock chimed 6. I didn't sleep a second. The words from last night replayed in my mind like a broken record. "You've ruined me, Mom." But I wasn't the one who had ruined him. The truth was about to do that. I dressed carefully, not in mourning, black, or fragile pastels, but in a navy suit I hadn't worn since Thomas's funeral. I tied my silver hair back, fastened the brooch he'd given me on our 30th anniversary, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the fragile widow David thought she was. She was steel-wrapped in grace. When I came downstairs, Lily was already in the kitchen, pale but determined. "Mr. Coleman called," she said. "The board meeting is set for 9 o'clock. He said you should come early." I nodded. "And David? He's going too." Of course he was. By the time we pulled up to the bank, the parking lot was already half full. Reporters hadn't arrived not yet, but I knew whispers had spread. Maplewood wasn't a big town. Rumors traveled faster than light. The bank's meeting room was on the second floor, a glass-walled chamber overlooking Main Street. Inside sat Mr. Coleman, 2 lawyers, the company's accountant, and 3 members of the Harlow Construction Board. A pot of coffee steamed quietly in the corner, the smell bitter and sharp. "Mrs. Harlow," Mr. Coleman greeted me standing as I entered. "I'm glad you came." I nodded to him, calm but alert. "Let's get this over with." Moments later, the door burst open. David walked in wearing a tailored gray suit, his tie slightly crooked, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Rachel followed her heels, clicking like gunshots on the tile. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at Mr. Coleman. "You've made a huge mistake," he said. "This entire thing is a fabrication." "My mother's confused. She doesn't understand the business." Mr. Coleman didn't rise to the bait. "Sit down, Mr. Harlow." You'll have your chance to speak." David hesitated, jaw tight, then sank into the chair across from me. His glare could have cut glass. Mr. Coleman opened a folder. "For the record, this meeting concerns the ownership and management of Harlow Construction following new evidence regarding the trust of the late Mr. Thomas Harlow." Rachel leaned forward. "New evidence? You mean that ridiculous notebook?" Coleman's tone remained even. "Among other things." He turned a page and gestured to the lawyer beside him, a woman named Ms. Pearson. "Please proceed." Ms. Pearson adjusted her glasses. "According to the documentation provided, all company shares were transferred into a trust under Mrs. Harlow's control 12 years ago. This trust includes provisions for oversight in the event of financial misconduct by any family member." David snorted. "Financial misconduct, please." She continued unbothered. "We have verified multiple unauthorized withdrawals and fraudulent vendor payments amounting to approximately $3 million. The color drained from Rachel's face. "David?" David slammed his palm on the table. "Those were business expenses. I had to make tough calls after Dad died." Coleman's voice was calm but sharp as a blade. "You mean the vacation home in Lake Erie, the Mercedes, or the wire transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands under your wife's maiden name?" Rachel gasped, turning to him. You put it in my name." "Keep your voice down," David hissed. "No, you keep your secrets," she shouted, standing up. "You told me it was legal." "You said your mother approved those transfers." The room erupted. The lawyers exchanged quick looks. One of the board members, an older man named Mr. Dunn, shook his head in disbelief. Coleman raised a hand. "That's enough. Mr. Harlow, do you deny these transactions?" David opened his mouth, but no words came out. "That's what I thought," Coleman said quietly. "In that case, the board has already prepared a motion for your removal as CEO pending legal review, effective immediately." What David shot up. "You can't do that. This company is mine." "No," I said, rising slowly. "It was your father's, and he trusted me, not you, to protect it." He turned toward me, trembling with rage. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're destroying everything Dad built." "I'm saving it," I said firmly. "From you." He took a step closer, his face twisted. "You always did love playing the victim. You let everyone pity you, poor widow, poor mother, but you never did a damn thing for this company." I didn't flinch. "I did everything. I worked beside your father for 40 years. I balanced the books, paid the workers, kept the house when you were still too young to tie your shoes. The only thing I didn't do was teach you gratitude." He opened his mouth to retort, but before he could speak, Ms. Pearson slid a small device across the table. "Mrs. Harlow, is this the recorder you brought to my office this morning?" I nodded. "Then I'd like to submit its contents for the record." She pressed play. David's voice filled the room, cold and cruel. "Don't test me, Mom. I swear." Then Rachel's. "You think this makes you powerful. You're old, Margaret. The world doesn't care about old women with secrets." And my reply, steady as a mountain: "If you believe that you haven't read the fine print." The silence afterward was deafening. Rachel covered her mouth. "You recorded us." David's voice cracked. "That's illegal." "No," Ms. Pearson said coolly. "Ohio is a one-party consent state. As long as Mrs. Harlow was part of the conversation, it's admissible." Coleman folded his hands. "Mr. Harlow, would you like to continue claiming this is all confusion?" David sank back in his chair, pale and shaking. You can't do this to me." I met his eyes. "I didn't. You did it to yourself." He looked at the board members, desperate. "You all know me. You know what I've done for this company." Mr. Dunn sighed. "We know, and we know what you've taken too. It's over, David." Rachel stood, grabbing her purse. "You're not ruining me for this," she hissed and stormed out. David didn't follow. He just sat there staring at the floor, broken. Coleman rose and placed a document in front of me. "Mrs. Harlow, the board unanimously agrees to reinstate you as the principal trustee of the company's assets. Effective immediately, you hold full authority." I hesitated, looking at the paper, the culmination of years of humiliation, grief, and silence. Then I took the pen and signed. When I looked up, David was watching me with glassy eyes. "Are you happy now?" he whispered. I paused, my heart heavy. "No, David, I'm heartbroken, but I'm also free." He stood shakily, collected his briefcase, and walked out without another word. As the door closed behind him, the room seemed to exhale. Mr. Coleman touched my shoulder gently. "It's over," he said, but I knew it wasn't. Because sometimes when pride is all a man has left, he'll destroy himself trying to keep it. And as I stepped out into the cold morning light, I saw David across the street, leaning against his car, staring at me with a look I couldn't quite read, part anger, part regret, and something darker underneath. The war wasn't over yet, but the battlefield had changed. And this time, I wasn't fighting to survive. I was fighting to reclaim everything. The wind had turned sharp by afternoon, sweeping leaves down Maplewood's narrow streets. When I returned home from the bank, the world outside seemed calm, deceptively calm, like the moment before thunder breaks again. Lily followed behind me, quiet and dazed. She'd been silent the whole drive, as though words might somehow unravel what she'd just witnessed. When we stepped inside, I hung up my coat, poured her a glass of water, and said softly, "Sit down, sweetheart." She looked at me, eyes red. "Mom, you won. You finally did it." I shook my head. This wasn't about winning. Then what was it about? I paused. The words felt heavy in my chest. It was about truth. But it's not finished yet. Before she could ask what I meant, the phone rang, the old landline, its tone cutting through the silence like a blade. I picked it up. Mrs. Harlow came. Mr. Coleman's voice. "I need you to come back to the bank. Now." My heart quickened. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong," he said, "but surprising. I found something in your husband's files, something I think you should see privately." He hesitated, then added, "And please bring your daughter." The line went dead. Half an hour later, we were seated in Mr. Coleman's office, the same one where I'd first learned about the trust. The blinds were drawn. The folder on his desk was thicker this time, sealed with a red ribbon. He looked older than yesterday, his expression grave but gentle. "Before we start," he said, "I want to remind you of something your husband told me years ago." He said, "Harold, if she ever needs to hear these 7 words, make sure it's when she's strong enough to understand them." Lily frowned. 7 words, Mr. Coleman nodded slowly. I didn't understand it back then, but now I do. He opened the folder. Inside were 3 documents, a sealed letter addressed to me, a birth certificate, and an official-looking deed. I reached for the letter, my hand trembling. It was written in Thomas's handwriting, the same steady looping script that had signed every check and every love note he'd ever given me. "My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, it means you've endured more than any woman should. I always feared David's pride would destroy him, and in protecting him, you'd destroy yourself. But there's one truth I could never tell you while I lived, because it would have broken you before it saved you. Lily isn't just our daughter Maggie. She's our legacy, and David isn't who he thinks he is." The words blurred for a moment as my breath caught. Before we married, I made a mistake, one I've carried for decades. David was the child of another woman. She came to me before our wedding and left him on my doorstep when he was 3 months old. I raised him as my own because I couldn't let you face that shame. But I never told you. I thought love would be enough to keep him whole. Now I see that secrets rot in silence. So I've left everything, the company, the estate, the trust, to you and Lily, because she is the true Harlow bloodline. If David ever learns this truth, don't hate him. Pity him. He's lived his whole life trying to prove a name that was never his. But when the time comes, Harold will say the 7 words that explain it all. He was never your father's real son. I'm sorry, Maggie. I should have told you sooner. But I know you'll handle this with grace. And if Lily is by your side, the Harlow name will stand for something good again. With all my love, Thomas. I couldn't breathe. For a long, dizzy moment, the room tilted around me. The ticking of the clock, the sound of my own heartbeat, Lily's voice, it all blurred together. "Mom," Lily whispered, "what does it mean?" I looked up at Mr. Coleman, who was watching me quietly. "He's saying I whispered that David isn't your brother." Lily's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, my God." Mr. Coleman nodded solemnly. That was the final condition of the trust. Those 7 words confirm that David has no legal or biological claim to the estate. Your husband left me instructions to reveal it only after the board hearing once Mrs. Harlow had taken back control. Lily's voice trembled. Does he know? Not yet, Mr. Coleman said. But he will soon. He came back to the bank this morning after you left. He demanded access to the safe deposit box, the same one where this letter was stored. My staff refused him. He didn't take it well. What do you mean, I asked? Mr. Coleman sighed. He made a scene. Security had to escort him out. He said, and I quote, "If she thinks she's won, tell her she hasn't heard the last from me." I closed my eyes, feeling both pity and dread. He'll come, I murmured. He won't stop until he's faced the truth. Lily reached for my hand. Mom, he'll lose everything. I squeezed her fingers gently. He already has. Mr. Coleman folded the letter back into the folder. Mrs. Harlow, you have a choice. You can keep this private, let him go his way, and never speak of it again. Or I can tell him I finished softly. He nodded. It might destroy him, but it will end this war once and for all. I looked out the window. The streets of Maplewood were bright again, children running past the bakery, life moving on as though none of this mattered. Maybe that was the cruelest part, how the world keeps spinning, even as your heart stops. I thought of David. As a boy, the first day he called me Mom, the nights he'd fall asleep on my shoulder while Thomas worked late, the pride I felt when he graduated. None of that had been a lie. My love for him had been real, even if our blood was not. I turned back to Mr. Coleman. He deserves to know the truth, no matter what it costs. He met my eyes and nodded. Then I'll be with you when you tell him. As we left the bank, Lily slipped her arm through mine. Are you sure about this, Mom, she asked. Yes, I said, because sometimes the only way to stop a storm is to let it hit and let what's weak be blown away. The car pulled up to the house just as dusk settled over the hills. The sky was bruised purple, streaked with gold, and waiting at the end of the driveway, hands clenched at his sides, was David. I felt Lily tense beside me. I opened the car door, stepped into the chill evening air, and said quietly to Mr. Coleman, I think it's time he heard those 7 words. The gravel crunched beneath David's shoes as he stormed up the driveway. His suit jacket flapped open and the wind carried the scent of whiskey before he even spoke. His eyes, bloodshot wild, met mine, and for the first time in my life, I saw a man who had lost everything, including himself. Why'd you call me here? He demanded. Haven't you humiliated me enough? I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to see the calm in my eyes, to feel the silence press against his anger like a wall. Mr. Coleman stood beside me on the porch, a quiet, steady presence. Lily hovered behind her face, pale but resolute. David, I said softly, come inside. There's something you need to hear. He laughed bitterly. Oh, more surprises. What is it this time? You gonna tell me the bank burned down, too? Please, I said, just come in. He hesitated, then shoved past Mr. Coleman and stepped inside the house. The place was warm, the fire crackling faintly in the hearth, but the tension in the air was like ice. He paced the living room, his footsteps echoing. You've taken my company, my money, my reputation. Congratulations, Mom. You've won. So what now? You gonna throw me out of this house, too? No, I said quietly. You're here because I don't want you to hear the truth from strangers. He frowned. What truth? Mr. Coleman placed the folder on the coffee table, the one sealed with the red ribbon. He untied it, slid the documents across the table, and said evenly, Your father left one final letter and one final revelation. David looked from me to him, confusion flickering across his face. Revelation. What the hell does that mean? I nodded at Mr. Coleman. He opened the envelope and read the first lines aloud, Thomas's words, clear and deliberate. If this message reaches you, David, then you've lost your way. I raised you as my own, loved you as my son. But blood and truth have a way of surfacing. You were not born my child. The words hit like thunder. David blinked. What Coleman's voice didn't waver. Your biological mother came to Thomas before he married Margaret. She left you with him, an infant, abandoned and sick. He chose to raise you as his own, to give you his name and his life. But you were never his by blood. David's face drained of color. That's a lie. It's the truth, I whispered. He wrote it himself. And it doesn't change the years he loved you. It just explains why things— Stop it, he shouted, his voice cracking. You're lying. You all are. Lily stepped forward, trembling. David, please sit down. He spun on her. Shut up. You knew about this, didn't you? I didn't, she cried. I just found out today. He turned to Mr. Coleman, his voice shaking. You forged this. You're working with her. Coleman's calm never faltered. I've known the truth for years. Your father told me to protect it until this day came. David's breath came fast, uneven. No, he wouldn't do that. He loved me. He did, I said softly. That's why he raised you. That's why he gave you everything. But love isn't the same as inheritance. His eyes glistened. You think this makes you right? You think this fixes what you did? I didn't do anything, I said. This was your father's choice, and it's mine now to end this fighting before it destroys what's left of us. He laughed, a hollow, broken sound. End it, you've already destroyed me. You took my company, my name, and now you're saying I'm not even his son. You've taken everything. I looked at him, tears gathering despite myself. No, David, you gave everything away when you traded love for greed. He sank into the couch, head in his hands. This can't be real. It is, Coleman said gently, and I'm sorry, but it means you have no legal claim to the Harlow estate. The trust, the assets, the company, they belong solely to Mrs. Harlow and her daughter. David's fingers clenched into fists. Her daughter. He lifted his head, glaring at Lily. So it's all yours now, huh? The golden child gets everything while I rot. Lily shook her head, crying. I don't want your pain, David. I just want peace. Peace, he spat. There's no peace after this. He stood abruptly, knocking over a lamp. You think you can erase me like I never existed? I am a Harlow. No, I said, my voice steady but aching. You were loved like one, but you never acted like one. He froze. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not rage, not hatred, but a hollow, haunting grief. Then he whispered, You should have just let me believe the lie. I couldn't, I said softly, because lies destroy families, David. They already destroyed ours. He took a shaky step back, his voice breaking. Then I hope you're happy, Mother, because now you've buried two sons, the one you lost to death and the one you just killed with the truth. He turned, stumbling toward the door. Lily called after him, David, please, don't go like this. But he didn't stop. The door slammed and the sound echoed through the hall like a gunshot. For a long time, no one spoke. The house seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Mr. Coleman said quietly, You did what your husband couldn't. You gave him the truth. I sank into the armchair, my whole body trembling. He hated me for it. He hated himself, Coleman said. He'll come to understand that in time. Lily knelt beside me, tears streaming down her face. Mom, are you all right? I nodded weakly. I don't know. But I think Thomas was right. Secrets rot in silence. And maybe this was the only way to set us free. Outside headlights swept across the window. David's SUV lingered at the end of the driveway. For a moment I feared he'd come back. But then the engine roared and the vehicle disappeared down the dark road, swallowed by the night. Mr. Coleman rose slowly. I'll stay nearby for a few days, he said, just in case. Thank you, I whispered. After he left, Lily and I sat by the fire in silence. The crackle of burning wood was the only sound. I reached for her hand, holding it tight. You know, I said softly, your father once told me that truth is like winter, harsh, cold, but necessary, because without it, spring never comes. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Do you think he'll ever forgive us? I stared into the flames. Maybe someday. But for now, we'll forgive him first. The firelight flickered across the room, catching the edges of the silver frame on the mantel, Thomas smiling, eternal proud. I closed my eyes and whispered, It's over, Tom. The truth is out. But deep down, I knew something was still coming, not from David, not from the law, but from the quiet ache that lingers after justice. because the hardest part of truth isn't revealing it, it's learning how to live with it. Spring came late that year to Maplewood. The snow melted in slow, uneven patches, revealing muddy grass and the first shy shoots of daffodils along the fence. The town woke gently from winter, but inside the white brick house at the end of Hillcrest Lane, silence lingered like an uninvited guest. It had been 6 weeks since that night, since David stormed out and never came back. He hadn't called, not once. But sometimes around midnight, I would hear a car slow down outside, idling for a moment before driving away. I never looked through the window. Some wounds need space before they can scab over. Lily stayed with me those first few weeks, helping with paperwork and the endless visits from lawyers and accountants. The company had stabilized under a temporary board. The employees, most of whom had known Thomas for decades, sent handwritten notes thanking me for saving the name. I didn't feel like a savior. I felt like a survivor who had outlived her own legend. One quiet morning, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the mist roll off the hills. The air smelled of wet soil and fresh beginnings. Lily joined me, wrapped in her father's old cardigan. "They're talking about renaming the scholarship fund," she said. "They want to call it the Harlow Foundation." I smiled faintly. "Your father would have liked that. He believed knowledge was the only inheritance worth fighting for." She hesitated. "And David?" I took a slow sip of coffee before answering. "He's alive. Mr. Coleman said he withdrew what was left of his personal savings and left town. No forwarding address." Lily looked down. "Do you hate him?" The question hung between us, soft as dust. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed awake wondering where I went wrong, of the boy who once brought me dandelions and called them flowers, of the man who stood in my living room and called me a fool. "No," I said finally. "I don't hate him. I grieve for him. Hatred is easy, it keeps you busy. Grief is harder. It makes you face what's gone." She reached for my hand. "You did the right thing." Maybe I said, but the right thing often hurts the most. That afternoon, I went through Thomas's old study one last time. Dust motes floated in the light from the window, and the faint smell of cedar still lingered in the drawers. I found the photo album we'd made the year we built this house, pictures of the first brick, the first garden, the Christmas tree we cut ourselves. In the middle was a photo of David, maybe 10 years old, sitting on his father's shoulders, both of them laughing at something just out of frame. I traced their faces with my finger. "You gave him your name, Tom," I whispered, and that was enough. In that moment, I realized something Thomas had known all along: family isn't written in blood or law. It's written in the choices we make when no one is watching. I packed the photo into a small wooden box with his wedding ring, the letter and the silver key. These were my relics, now proof that love can outlast even betrayal. Then I closed the lid and locked it. 2 weeks later, Mr. Coleman visited. His health was failing. I could see it in the way he leaned heavier on his cane. Still, his eyes were bright, full of that steady kindness that had carried me through the storm. "I came to see the garden," he said. "Thomas used to brag that you could grow roses out of concrete." We walked outside. The garden had begun to bloom again, pinks, yellows, and soft whites dancing in the breeze. "You were right," I said. "They survived the winter. So did you," he replied with a smile. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a simple certificate, the official closure of the trust. Everything now bore my name and Lily's. Legally, finally the war was over. "What will you do now?" he asked. I looked toward the hills where sunlight broke through the clouds. "I'll live quietly. Maybe open a community garden. Maybe teach children how to plant something and care for it until it grows." He nodded. "That sounds like you, Margaret." As he turned to leave, he paused. "You know, Thomas always said you were the strongest person he'd ever met. I think he underestimated you." When he drove away, the house felt lighter somehow, as though all its ghosts had decided to rest. That evening, I stood on the porch as the sun dipped behind the maple trees. A car slowed at the edge of the driveway. My heart tightened, but I stayed still. The window rolled down, thud. Older, somehow thinner, his face lined with regret. He didn't get out of the car. He just looked at me through the fading light. "I heard about the scholarship," he said finally. His voice was low, raw. "You named it after Dad." "Yes," I said. "I did." He nodded once, eyes glistening. He would have been proud. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." The word Mom broke something open inside me. I swallowed the ache in my throat. "Take care of yourself, David." He gave a small, trembling nod, then drove away, this time for good. I watched until the taillights disappeared beyond the trees. Then I whispered into the cool air, "Be free, my son." Because no matter what the papers said, he would always be mine, in the way that mattered in the years we'd already lived. Later that night, as I closed the curtains, Lily came downstairs with a letter in her hand. "Mom," she said softly, "I wrote something for the scholarship announcement. Do you want to hear it?" I nodded. She read aloud, "The Harlow Foundation honors not just the name of a family, but the hands that built it, the hearts that held it, and the truth that healed it." Tears filled my eyes. "That's beautiful," I whispered. She smiled. "I learned from the best." We stood together at the window watching the stars flicker over the quiet town. The house no longer felt empty. It felt alive, filled with memories, forgiveness, and peace, hard won. I thought of Thomas's last words, "You're the anchor." Maybe I still was, but now I wasn't holding anyone down. I was holding us steady, long enough for the next generation to grow. And as the night settled over Maplewood, I realized something simple, something truer than all the money or property in the world. We are only as rich as the love we refuse to give up.